This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Episode 200 of the roller coaster will soon be here, and this is your chance to be part of the fun. I'm going to be recording this episode with coaches and listeners just like you. If you want to be part of the fun, head over to nectargrowth.com. Sign up for free and RSVP for the November 18th event. All of the details will be under the events tab. I can't wait to see you there. What are you waiting for? Come join us. You know you're worth it. By hosting the roller coaster, I've been able to learn from great coaches and hear many stories of triumph over adversity. These lessons are gifts, and they have served me in more ways than I can count. Scott Miller, host of the FranklinCovey On Leadership podcast, also realized the wisdom that he's gained from speaking with top coaches and mentors. Scott has gathered this transformational insight and turned it into a book, Master Mentors. Welcome to the roller coaster, Scott.
Lucy, it's an honor. Thank you for the spotlight and the platform today.
Thank you. So I want to go back to the beginning where you made that big pivot in your career, because you started off being an executive and then you moved into becoming a senior advisor on thought leadership. What inspired this change?
Well, small correction. I didn't start being an executive. I kind of ended being an executive, right? So 25 years in the FranklinCovey company, of course, the global leadership development firm founded by Dr. Stephen R. Covey of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People fame. Lived all over the world in London, Chicago, and Salt Lake City. I'm from Orlando, Florida originally. And I literally worked from the front line all the way up to the C-suite, where I became the chief marketing officer for a decade, and then became the executive vice president of thought leadership, where now I'm privileged to host their podcast, which is the world's largest weekly leadership podcast, hitting about 7 million people every Tuesday. But 25 years, Lucy, is a long time in one organization. Most people don't stay 25 months, let alone 25 years now in the new generation. So I started to lay the groundwork for a pivot outside of the firm. I was very aware that either act or be acted upon in life, right, and in your careers. And I also was privy to a horrifying quote I once heard, which was, "You're never in the room when your career is decided for you." Ugh. And although I was at the very top, one step from the top, I didn't want the board or the CEO acting upon me. I was in good standing, but you never know, things happen. So I decided to negotiate an exit. It was very amicable. I am a consultant to the firm, but I wanted to do some things that you couldn't do as an officer in a public company, governed by, not illegal things. Now that I say that, it sounds funny, but I wanted to write and speak and be an entrepreneur, and I could not do that as an officer of the company. So I left my role after 25 years, and as you said, made a major pivot. And now, in addition to consulting with FranklinCovey, I'm now writing books on my own and podcasting and working on a television reality series, Stand By. I host a book club, and I'm authoring a whole variety of books for Simon & Schuster and HarperCollins and others that are coming out in the coming years. And the book that I wrote today we're going to talk about is Master Mentors. This was really the kind of behind-the-scenes insights of what these very famous guests said, oftentimes off air. As you know, sometimes it's the conversation before you press play or after you press stop that, the guest will share something inspirational. So with their permission, I gathered those insights in this book, Master Mentor. But I'm a fairly, I think, typical executive that after accomplishing what you want to accomplish and learning, I think, what I had to learn, I decided to use that knowledge and apply it in an entrepreneurial venture for the second half of my career, or maybe the final third or final fourth, depends on how long I live.
So you've really been part of this self-improvement journey for
3 decades.
many, many years.
3 decades.
So
That's right.
you've seen it evolve from, this sort of traditional books and courses to the online version that we have today, and how you can reach millions and millions of people with a click of a button.
I've also seen it evolve from white men, mostly white American men, that have now, most of them have passed on, and you have a whole new generation of not just females, but of people of different races and backgrounds and experiences that are bringing enormous thought leadership, whether it be Brene Brown or Liz Wiseman or Rachel Hollis or Trent Shelton or any number of other people that are now not prototypical white males that were executives in companies and said, this is how it shall be. And so I think there's great diversity happening, not just from the digital online modular setting, but also from different perspectives as well.
Yeah, we definitely have more diversity in the information being shared, with more and more people entering this arena. So over all of the interviews that you've done so far, what are some of the greatest lessons that you've learned that have translated to you personally?
And this is a 3-hour interview, right?
Maybe the disco remix.
Okay. The book is called Master Mentors, 30 Transformative Insights from Our Greatest Minds. It's the first of 10 volumes in the Master Mentor series. So volume 2 is coming out in 2022 with 30 new insights from 30 new people. But your question really is about kind of initially, I've learned so much. I think I've learned the biggest idea that I've learned that I think most of these people manifest. There's 3. The first is these mentors have an indefatigable work ethic. I had a podcast host recently take offense to that. Oh, so you mean that the key to life is hard work? Tell it to my dad who sold vegetables in the back of his truck. No, I didn't say the key to being a transformative person is hard work, but it helps. And I'm impressed at how these wealthy and many times famous people work exceptionally hard at writing and pollinating and aggregating and sharing and lifting and mentoring. The second, I think what they share is an abundance mentality. There isn't a scarce bone in their body. They genuinely want to lift others up and help others and allow people to learn from their own successes and their messes. They're quite comfortable hyping their mistakes, hyping their failures, and teaching through them quite vulnerably that way. And lastly, I'd argue one of the biggest insights I've taken is there's no such thing as overnight success. There is overnight fame. It's fleeting typically, but there's no such thing as overnight success. All these 30 mentors toiled long before you'd ever heard of them. They wrote 5 books that no one bought, and then the 6th one hit and it took off, right? Or they had, 5 radio programs that no one heard about, and the 6th one got syndicated and became nationally. You get the point, is that most of these people like me toiled in obscurity, or at least worked for decades before you became aware of their influence, their books, their radio program, whatever it is they had as a bully pulpit, so to speak. So I think it gives hope to anybody who's looking to build influence and build your career that, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes, in many cases, most cases, 20, 30, 40 years for people that built their knowledge and made lots of mistakes and had bankruptcies and failures, and then over time earned the right to have some influence.
And I think it's that perseverance.
It is. Patience. It's being in it for the long game, right? It's Dory Clark, who's one of the mentors, just wrote a book called The Long Game, being a long-term thinker in a short-term world. And you're exactly right. It's being able to pivot. It's understanding that sometimes a disappointment turns into an appointment for something else, an appointment for you to double down, reconsider. I think you're absolutely right. It's perseverance is a great description of these influential people.
And it's also the willingness to keep going at it, knowing that there may not ever be an outcome. And it's the same with, let's just look at the typical podcaster. How many podcasters? I mean, people look at podcasters and they think, well, you're making all of this money. And I laugh and I say, well, no, it's just an expensive hobby. Because you're doing this time and time again. with no idea if anyone's actually going to listen to your episodes, which ones are going to resonate,
Right.
and who your next guest will be. And you have to just it's blind faith. You just keep going at it, and
I think it's
eventually.
courage. It's courage
Is it
too.
courage?
I do. I
Yeah.
think part of it's blind faith, part is courage, part I think also is a generosity. Like you said, you're not probably paying your mortgage off of your podcast. If you are, email me those tips, by the way. But I do. I think it's inherently with that.
No, I'm
Not
not.
yet.
Like I said, it's an expensive hobby.
I understand, but you know what? It is a gift. It is a gift you're giving to the people who do listen to your podcast. And I think if you stick with it, if you stick with most things in life, and you learn and you relearn and you pivot, and you're open to feedback and you're not stuck on your ego, you're going to find a niche that hits a voice.
So do you find that, let's just say, the average person, they give up too easily? Because they're not keep going, because they stop when it gets hard.
I don't know if I would say the average person, but I think some leadership lessons that I've learned are you have to differentiate your feelings, your emotions, and your opinions from facts. Both of those are valuable in life, but you can't conflate the two. Be very mindful of when facts are speaking to you and when your feelings are speaking to you. And don't try to disguise your feelings as facts. That would be one piece of advice. Another is, Rachel Hollis, who's a friend of mine, a very famous author and podcaster, and had a rough year the past, 18 months or so, if anybody's followed her, listening to you. She said something to me once I think is profound. She said, Scott, most people aren't scared of failure. They're scared of other people seeing them fail. And so one is you kind of have to get past this idea of seeing other people seeing you implode. I hosted a radio program on iHeartRadio for a year. I thought we would syndicate it. We didn't. I didn't think twice about it if someone thought that I failed. I learned so much about being a host and the right equipment and the cadence and what kind of guest, what time of day. And I learned so much. I generally failure is not in my vocabulary. For me, it's just all about learning and pivoting and improving and maturing. That sounds like a cliche and a tagline or a throwaway, but literally failure isn't a word I ever use, or even, it's not an emotion that I associate with. I just pivot and move on. And I also am pretty nimble in my thinking. I'm a fairly agile thinking. And I think to your point around, is it people giving up? I think you can't expect for your first idea to be the final idea. You can't expect for your genius to hit everybody where you think it is. You have to be humble and willing to change your mind and to listen and to realize, my first idea may not be what makes me successful. In fact, the science shows that 93% of the time, organizations that achieve financial success do so with an emergent strategy, not the deliberate one they set out with. 93% of the time, your first idea, your patent, your copyright isn't what's going to make you successful. You have to be able to change your mind and be open to influence. So I think your point about perseverance is right. And I'm sure some people give up too soon. And some people perhaps don't give up soon enough because they're so doggedly determined that their idea is going to work, and they're not mature or self-aware enough to listen to the signs, to listen how they might tack left or tack right. One of the things that Dr. Covey, our founder, said that I think is wise, he said, humble leaders are more concerned with what is right than being right. And I'm not a naturally humble person, so this does resonate with me. I'd argue to all of the entrepreneurs or solopreneurs or intrapreneurs that are listening, or anybody that's thinking of a side hustle, an idea, whenever you're entering into a meeting or a conversation, ask yourself, am I more concerned with what is right for my podcast guest, for my advertisers, for my clients, for my investors, or am I more concerned with being right, which is my ego, which is my fragility around my brand? It's good advice.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the being right component is about the ego, and you have to really have to remove yourself from ego to actually be able to see clearly of what's going on.
Well said.
So going back to your book, you're talking about your first 30 mentors in your book. When you wrote it, how many episodes had you actually recorded?
Oh, about 125 or so. I mean, over 100.
You had a good chunk in.
I did, and I wanted the book to be episodic. It is like, one moment I'm interviewing and writing about a neuroscientist and how to protect your brain. The next moment I'm talking about messaging for corporate brands. And I come back to, lessons learned about how to pivot from a pitfall in life. And then I go on to gratitude, or, keeping a scoreboard that's engaging your employees. And in fact, one publisher passed on it, a publisher that had published several of my very successful books. They thought it was too episodic. And HarperCollins caught the dream. And now that first publisher is kicking themselves because it's done extraordinarily well in just the 6 weeks it's been out. So I picked the people based on what I thought would be interesting to a wide audience, and kind of hit people differently wherever they were in their life, coming out of a divorce, coming into a new marriage, a new parent, just got fired, just got hired, just got promoted. And so I like the fact that it's a little bit chicken soup for the soul that way. And I'm looking forward to complementing the first volume with the next volume coming out with 30 new mentors and 30 new transformative insights in 2022.
It's funny, chicken soup for the soul was exactly what popped in my head when you said the first publisher is kicking themselves.
Yes, I know. They're kicking themselves right now.
Your publisher had the vision to be able to see what it could be, and see its value. And what I loved about the book is that it's not the type of book that you necessarily have to read cover to cover. You can hone into a specific topic that's resonating with you at the time. And it also strikes me as the type of book that you're going to put down and pick up multiple times. As opposed
that was exactly my intention. You've nailed it. I don't know if you or your listeners or viewers can see behind me, just to my left over here, is the stack of books that came in this week of people wanting me to interview them on the podcast that I host. And they're all 80,000 words and 400 pages. And I think the reader is looking for shorter, dip in, dip out kind of books right now. So this book is very easy to read. It's breezy, it's fast, it's light. This is not War and Peace. It's an easy read. And like you said, you can open it up and go to chapter 7 and go back to 2 and go to 13 and go to 24. And I wrote it in a way that you honestly could read it in 30 days by your bedside. Each night, pick up a chapter, spend 6 minutes reading one, think about it, look at the question at the end of the chapter that's quite provocative, and hopefully put that into action in your life the next day.
So when you look at the first, we'll call it the first edition, because you've definitely got more on the go.
Yeah.
What is the most important lesson that you want people to extract from Master Mentors?
Well, probably is the title, is that I'm a passionate advocate of mentoring, both being a mentor and being a mentee. But I think a lot of people define it too narrowly. I have a lot of mentors that I've never met, that don't know I exist. I have people that are authors or speakers or podcast hosts or radio hosts that I listen to religiously, and they've been mentoring me for decades. They have no idea Scott Jeffrey Miller is even alive. So I don't think you have to go up to someone and say, will you mentor me on how to launch a pet business on this zip code? That's also a great idea. But I do think mentorship is about determining in your life, what is it you want to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And then finding someone that can help you. And it may not be that if you want to open a hair salon, it may or may not be someone who's opened a hair salon. It might be someone who is an entrepreneur or a banker. Or maybe it's someone that's had 3 bankruptcies and you learn from their lessons. It might be that you are finding people that have very similar passions or personalities and uncovering how did those work as their strengths and their weaknesses. And how might you avoid falling into some of those messes and traps as well. So I think the big idea is around making sure you have multiple mentors in your life where they share wisdom with you, knowledge. They don't try to turn you in to a mini-me version of them, but that they help impart through their own vulnerability and wisdom, lessons they've learned in the hopes that they might be adaptable to your journey. Become a mentor and a mentee, and it doesn't mean you even have to have met that person.
No, and one of the first resources that I used when I began my self-improvement journey was exploring different speakers on YouTube.
Well
I
said.
learned many, many lessons that way. And then, each coach or mentor that I listened to would lead me to another one and another one. And that just opened up a whole new path for me.
I think there's so many resources, right? Podcasting, books, YouTube videos, conferences. Yeah, nicely said. There's no shortage of it. You have to go out and have to
No,
ask.
and you have to be willing to learn. And as you mentioned earlier, you have to have the courage.
Yeah.
Because it's never easy.
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up now, Scott, where can people connect with you and grab a copy of your book?
Well, my wife says it's not difficult, and that wasn't a compliment from her. She thinks I'm overexposed. So you can visit my website, Lucy, at scottjeffreymiller.com. The books that I write, the most recent one, Master Mentors, of course, you can find it at every book retailer, Amazon. You can find it on any book retailer, including local independent bookstores, and order it. You can connect with me or follow me, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Clubhouse. I'm on them all.
To connect with Scott, make sure you check out the show notes. I will have all of the links in there. And Scott, thank you so much for joining me today.
Lucy, thank you. You're a class act. I appreciate the platform today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.